Hi guys, good morning, and first of all, welcome to my kitchen. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to be doing a food demonstration for you for the Pizza Pinwheels practical. Now, if you weren't able to get the ingredients or can't get the ingredients, don't worry. It's not a problem. You can just watch the video. There are questions on Show My Homework for you to answer, so you will need to watch it all so you can answer them. However, if you do have the ingredients, feel free to take part and try it yourself. I would love to see the photos of what you produce. Now, usually in the food room, we'd go in and Miss Jewel would have everything prepared for us. That includes disinfecting the surfaces. So I've got my disinfectant here, and what I'm going to do is just going to spray this and wipe it down. Now, do not start cooking until all of that is wiped down and dry. You don't want to get disinfectant in your food. Okay? Okay, so I've got everything I need for this. Now, first of all, the flour, I don't actually need for making the pizza pinwheels. That's going to be for the surface, which I'll talk you through later. You will need your puff pastry, okay? Now, I've got 500 grams, because that's all they sell in the shops that I could find, but I'm actually going to cut this in half, because I only need 250. I've got some cheese and a grater ready to grate. I've got an onion, that's the topping that I've chosen. You might have some meats, but it's definitely worth having either a pepper or an onion or something so you can practice your chopping skills. I've got my tomato puree, and then finally I've got a sharp knife, a spoon, a rolling pin, and this is very important, I've got my tray with grease-proof paper already on it and set up. Now, before I start, I need to come to my oven. Okay, now mine is an electric oven, and I just need to turn it here. I need to set it to 200 degrees. Now, for an electric oven, that's really easy because you can see the two lights are on showing it's ready. However, some of you might have a gas oven, so be careful with that because you obviously need to light it. Okay? So, next what I'll need to do is I'll need to flour my surface. Now, the flour is there to stop the pastry from sticking to it, okay? So I'm just sprinkling that on here, and then I'm just spreading the flour out over the surface. This absorbs moisture. Flour absorbs moisture, so it's gonna mean that my pastry isn't too wet and sticky, and it's nice and easy to roll out, okay? Okay, so I've cut my puff pastry, and I've laid it out on my floured surface. Now, my next step will be to get my rolling pin and to roll it out. Now, what I like to do is I just like to rub the rolling pin in the flour a little bit, and it's going to be very difficult to do one-handed. Usually, you should have one hand on each side and roll it out. Now, I'm obviously going to have to try and put one hand like this, okay? Now, what I want to try and do is try and roll this out to about the thickness of a 50p piece, okay, so quite thin. And what I want to do is try and keep it as rectangular as possible. Now, notice how that was really easy to lift up. Now, as I drag it back to the middle, I've brought some flour with me to make sure that my surface isn't sticky, okay? Now, I'm going to roll this out properly with two hands. I'm going to stop the video and start it again once it's done, but you've seen how to do that. Remember, one hand on each side so you get equal pressure, because at the moment my hand could be tilted, and as you can see looking here, I've applied more pressure down here than I have here, so it's not got a nice perfect rectangle. So to get it nice and perfect, both hands pressing down, equal pressure, okay? Now we're using puff pastry. Puff pastry is really special because it's light, fluffy, okay, and it actually raises without any raising agent. Now, to make bread, etc., we might use yeast to make it rise. Well, puff pastry is really special because it only uses flour, butter, and salt, okay? But it actually rises and it becomes this very flaky, very airy pastry, all right? Unlike a dough. Because when we make a dough, which we'll see later, it looks very much like this, but puff pastry will rise, naturally get air into it and become these very flaky layers, all right? So it's nice and thin and light. So that's really important to remember about puff pastry. So that's all now rolled out. Now what I'm going to need is I'm now going to need my tomato puree, okay? Now, tomato puree is a concentrate, which means that one little mouthful, one little spoonful is going to be very, very flavoursome. So you don't need too much of this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze this out onto my base here. Now always squeeze from the end, okay? Always squeeze from the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop there, then I'm going to use my spoon, I'm going to use the back of my spoon just to kind of brush this on, okay? And make my nice pizza base, like so, okay? So just spreading that out all over the dough like this. Now it's not actually a pizza that we're making, so make sure that you do go right the way to the edges, okay? Make sure you get everything. If you need a little bit more tomato puree, that's not a problem. You can add that quite easily, okay? But it looks like what I've done here should be absolutely fine. So there we go. Now, like I said, depending on the tomato flavour that you want, the more you can add. All right. So what I'm actually now going to do is I'm now going to come over to my chopping board. Okay. And my chopping board has my onion on. Now this is going to be quite difficult for me to show, but I'm going to give it a go, okay? And I'm going to show you the different methods for chopping this onion, okay? Right, okay, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Now I've got my sharp knife. Be very, very careful with this. Now with the onion, it's got two ends. It's got the root end here, and then it's got the stalk end here. This would actually grow, okay, because the onion would be deep in the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut the stalk end off, okay, using my sharp knife. Like so, okay, so remove that, that's gone, I don't need it. Now what I actually want to do now is I want to cut my onion in half. So I'm going to place it face down. I can pull off as much of the outside skin as possible, okay, but it doesn't matter too much. Now I'm going to use a cutting method called the bridge method. Now to do that, I'm going to grab my onion like this, and I'm actually going to put my knife under my hand here. So you can see I've formed a bridge with my hand, and then my knife goes under the bridge and cuts down. Now the reason why we keep the root, okay, we keep the root so the whole thing stays together and doesn't fall apart. Now what I can do is I can peel the skin layer off, okay, and that should come off quite easily, right, and all this is then going to go into the bin. And what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to use the claw method to chop this up, all right? So, in fact, first of all, I want this sliced tiny, so I'm going to go back to my bridge method, and I'm going to slice this down like so. Now, I'm sure none of you will, because your parents will no doubt be watching and making sure that you're doing this properly and keeping safe. But make sure when you're doing this that if you do cut yourself, you wash it, clean it, put a plaster on it, and don't start cooking again until you have that plaster on. Now for the claw method, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a little claw with my hand. I'm going to put my hand on the edge here. I'm then going to slide the knife down my nail. Put that back on the end there. Slide my knife down the nail like this and cut down, okay? Slide my knife down the nail and cut down. I'm actually using the nail to stop me from cutting my fingers, okay? The nail is the protection, so I can go down and cut, okay? So what I've done is I've started putting my toppings on my pizza. Now I've only put a little bit of onion at the top here because my family aren't hugely keen on onions and pizza. So I'll put the remainder in like a spaghetti bolognese or a carbonara that I make later. So I'm only going to have a little bit of onion up there. Now it's cheese time. Now I've already grated some cheese here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put my grated cheese onto my pizza. Now you'll notice that I grated a load of cheese and I'm going to need some more. Hold my hand up and say I love cheese, so I'm going to probably put a bit too much on than what I need to, but I'm going to cover this all in cheese, okay? And then that should be ready to go. So I've got my pizza covered in cheese now. I know that the onion is this little strip here. What I now need to do is I need to roll this nice and tight, okay? Now it's really important, don't put too much on top here, because it's too thick, you're not going to be able to roll it, all right? So I've put a decent amount of cheese on here, and I might have put some, maybe some meats on there. Now those meats must already be cooked. Do not put raw chicken on here, because this is only going to go in the oven for between 8 to 10 minutes, and that's not long enough to cook raw meat. So you could put some pre-cooked ham on here, you could put some pre-cooked pepperoni. The key words there are pre-cooked. All of this must be pre-cooked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start lifting this, and I'm going to fold it in on the sides like so. Now you need to make this tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this up, and notice I'm kind of pushing in as I do it, okay? And then you should just be able to roll. All right, now we'll talk about the ends in a minute. So I've now got my rolled out pizza pinwheel ready. Now the end, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to fold the end in a little bit and just press that in there. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now I don't put it in just like this. I get my sharp knife again, and what I do is I actually cut sections. Okay, now the sections need to be maybe about 2 centimeters long. Okay, should look nice like that, and I'm just going to place them standing up on my baking tray. Now any of you that have watched any cooking programs, anything like Bake Off, they always talk about trying to get consistency. So when you're cutting this, really try and make sure that each pinwheel that you cut is the same consistency, okay? So really make sure that you're doing that. I think I'm doing an all right job so far. Like I said, they need to stand up. Now, if they fall over in the oven, you can get cheese then spilling everywhere, and it will become very difficult to get them off. You might lose a lot of your toppings. So you need to make sure that they are stood up nice and properly. So I've got my pizza pinwheels here. I think they look quite good. They're all about the same sort of spacing. Now, the oven has been on ever since I started doing the demonstration. One thing I think is really important for me to mention at this stage is I've actually been washing my hands before touching my phone to make the video and during each stage. Now it's very difficult for me to film that because obviously I need both hands to wash them, so I had to pause and stop the video, but I have been doing that. Now, all I like to do is just press each one down, just in that attempt to try and stop them falling over. And this is now ready to go in the oven. Now, I'm not going to put it in this way. I'm going to put it in this way, okay? Ovens tend to be warmer nearer to the back. So if I put it in lengthways, these will all cook a lot quicker than these. This means that, okay, they'll all cook probably a little bit quicker than these, but there's a better consistency in my cooking. So I'm going to open my oven door here. The higher you put the higher shelf you put them on, okay, the bigger the temperature. Now I need to close this here so don't let the heat out, and I'm going to set a timer for 8 minutes and then check on them. Now in that time I'm going to come all the way over here because crucial part is washing up time. So my hot tap, okay, my hot tap goes on. I need to make sure that I am getting that temperature nice and warm. So my hand is underneath, checking and seeing, is this getting hot yet? Not yet. I'm actually going to empty my washing up liquid bowl. Like so. Right, that's starting to go warm. So a squirt of washing up liquid in there. That's now nice and ready, and what I can do is I can wash up all my utensils, and then what I can do is I can clean the sides. Now with the flour, use the sharp knife to scrape the flour into your hand and put it in the bin. If you put a wet sponge on there, the flour is just going to absorb all the moisture and it's going to be an absolute mess to clean up. So scrape all excess flour into your hand and then put it into the bin. Okay? So use the 8 minutes to wash up and tidy up, and let's see what these pizza pinwheels look like when they come out the oven. So the timer has gone on my phone, about 8 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get my pizza pinwheels out and check on them. Now what I should see is a very light and fluffy pastry that's sort of browned on the top. Now these here, that looks done. This looks like it needs a minute or two longer. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take some off and I'm going to keep some in. So I'm going to get my plate here, and what I can do is the ones that have cooked, being very careful with this because you can probably tell from the speed at which I'm taking them off, they are hot. Now notice these ones actually fell over. Now they look great, but these ones that fell over, thankfully, because I didn't put too much cheese in, the cheese hasn't spilled onto the back. But what I'm going to do is I'm now going to put these ones in for another minute and then they will be done. So pizza pinwheels are made, they're all out the oven. I think they look quite good, I think they look quite nice. Now, one thing I must do is I must leave these for a little bit. I shouldn't try and eat them right now because they are really hot. Now, I made a mistake. What I should have done is I should have let them just cool down a little bit on the baking tray because you can burn your fingertips from touching them. Okay, so they look delicious, but I need to let them cool for a couple of minutes just until they're ready to put in my mouth, because the inside of the pizza pinwheel, just in here, is going to be really, really warm. So I need to make sure that I'm leaving them to cool before eating them. So give that a go if you can. See what your family think. Can you make yours look better than mine? Think they look all right? Think they look decent? But they could always be better. So challenge to you. So hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping well, and I will see you next practical lesson back here in my kitchen. Take care.